So it's been an interesting 2 weeks, 3 weeks, with everything ranging from power outages for entire weekends and more to riots and all sorts of other ridiculous activity that shouldn't occur in normal society. But then I guess we don't really live in a normal society, do we? And you have to sort of question, or I do anyway. I question that. I wonder what it is that makes us accept the situation the way it is. Um, in the last few weeks, I've had multiple meetings with politicians from various parties, and if you put their ideologies aside, their varied ideologies aside, there's one common theme between all of them, and that is the desire to retain power, to stay in control. And that worries me because, well, it's always been that way, I suppose. It's those few people that are prepared to stand up and argue with each other and try and win the point that are subconsciously trying to remain in control of a system. And the system is about control, but it's a self-perpetuating thing. And the political aspect of it, of course, is, I think, lost on a lot of people. I've had, aside from the discussions with the politicians, I've also had discussions with individuals and groups of people. And it's becoming pretty plain that not many people even give thought to it and try and understand their role in the situation, their role in any of it. And yeah, I find that a little concerning because the system is set up to serve itself. The politicians are in there to retain control of their position in it, to the point where people don't even understand the correlation, for instance, between the municipal sort of debacle and the politicians running it. So, yeah, that's a big concern. Here comes Jonty. He's going to join me for breakfast, so I'll get back to this just now. Remember, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, this is true. What's this?
Okay.
It's a hawk.
It is a small hawk. There was an eagle flying around earlier on.
Did you?
It wasn't me, but someone of the same intellect.
Very
So
good.
I'm sitting here with Jonty. We've just had breakfast. Well, I did. Jonty just coffeed. And we were talking about politicians and the system and how the whole damn thing is self-serving. And yes, we should have recorded that conversation earlier on.
Yeah.
Although some people might not have wanted to hear it. But I think something, just leading on from what I was talking about earlier on, and about the system being self-perpetuating and self-serving for the politicians, I think that is a really important thing to try and get people to understand. The other night at the meeting I was talking about people looking at the whole voting thing from a mathematical perspective and trying to forget the emotional nonsense and the heritage and all of this nonsense that goes with it, and rather looking at fixing the existing problem, because there seems to be a common problem, a common enemy, if you will. And I don't know what it is with people that they don't want to admit that they are part of the problem, that they are part of perpetuating that problem. It's like everyone is too busy, tied up in trying to survive, to actually be too interested in doing something to make any serious change. So the system itself, the way I see it, is very well designed. But, well, not but I don't see any way of effectively changing it and getting people to practice a little bit of honesty and recognize their role in it, and then what to do about the whole thing, you know.
Yeah, if I could say that, as I mentioned earlier, Alan, it all goes back to school, really, when we were choosing prefects.
Indeed.
It was a case of, well, you nominate me and I'll nominate you, and it's a carve-up to begin with. So we're already conditioned from back then. I was when you were 14,
very young.
15,
Yeah.
15.
And over millennia. I'm quite sure that the nature of the conditioning has changed over 1,000 or 2 years, but there is definitely conditioning. And we've spoken about this before, where we've said that, 2,000 years ago there was a couple of Greeks or a couple of Romans having a chat about exactly the same stuff, about how are these people doing this to us. But the people are in fact doing it to the people, I think.
Well, when I first came to this country, it was blatantly obvious at the time that the English and the Afrikaners didn't actually get on well together, but we rubbed along, it was a case of you scratch mine and back and I'll comb yours, so. So it was so we had to get along, but now.
I was talking about this the other day, actually, and I was talking to some Afrikaans people, and I said that one of the advantages that the Afrikaners have in this country, and it's not only the Afrikaners, it's also other, let's call them tribal groups, because let's face it, they're all tribes. It's a tribe. And one of the advantages that they seem to have is the idea of some common heritage, and they strive to hang on to that. And it's blatantly apparent that the English-speaking, European stock don't have that same cohesive approach. And I guess it's not throughout the tribe. With the Afrikaners, I'm quite sure that even within that tribe, as it were, that you have the fragmentation, but it just seems to be more apparent with the English-speaking mob that they are hell bent on being different from each one individually, And I guess that happens with the Xhosas and the Zulus and everybody else. It's just, I'm guessing within those groups, everybody wants to make their own tribe. But I think we're at a point historically as well where you need to look at the reality of the situation in terms of the big problem and how the individual behavior and the selfishness and all of that affects everybody, and it affects the outcome for everybody, the negativity of it all. So, like I said, I don't profess to have any answers. I can tell you though that from my discussions in the last 2 or 3 weeks with these politicians, damned politicians. Let's just refer to them as damned politicians, because I honestly throw them all in the same bloody boat. I don't care if they are black, white, green, purple, khaki. I don't care. I don't care if you wear, I don't care what party you belong to. If you have this ideology or that, it doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, if you're in that system, you're probably a part of the problem. But I was ranting on now. I've forgotten my train of thought. I guess you were following it, sort of. Is that Neil? No, that's not Neil.
Not with kids, anyway.
Not with kids.
No, tribalism. I think we've got this inbuilt dislike for anybody that doesn't look like us.
That's a key part of the problem.
And it's really nothing to do with how that person is. I mean, I could say some of my best friends are black, but I won't. But
someone's snowflake, might melt because you said black or white, or
And I don't know if you've been following the news in the UK with the RAF. They've had to embark on a quota system for recruits.
Okay.
There must be women,
right,
and there must be ethnic minorities. Doesn't matter if they're up to the job or not. And it sounds very familiar, this. Sounds
Of
very,
course.
very,
But
very
it's,
familiar.
again, it's part of that whole political control, the system of political control. It's why, and from the people um, that dictate that type of thing, why would they not do so? Because if it allows further fragmentation, further control, why would it not be perpetuated?
Yeah,
I think we'll pause for the cyclists and let the cyclists go away, because cyclists,
or cyclists.
yeah, it's another tribe,
Yeah.
different tribe.
Yes. Discovered the wheel, you see.
Exactly, exactly. Ooh, the wheel. Some of the politicians would do well to discover the wheel, and maybe fire
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and water, for washing hands, not whiskey. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine the first caveman when they discovered coal? And this rock burst into flames.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting back to what I was getting back to what I was talking about. Oh, we're talking about pancakes. That's cool. Getting back to what I was talking about just now about the getting people to understand that in order to change the system, they actually have to go and vote for something specifically, but that the fragmentation that comes from having this belief that you have some influence in something because your heritage dictates that it should be so. It actually demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of the system and how the control actually works, and the fact that it is perpetuated with the prime objective being to fragment any serious opposition to a specific ideology that is in place mainly because of deception. I guess it all goes about deception to a great extent. Talking the other night at the meeting, I kind of watched people, and yeah, I did speak at length, and I'm not surprised.
That's not like you.
No, it's not exactly. But I did watch some eyes glazing over, and I wonder, if we have enough people that are open to making difficult decisions and going against the norm, going against what they would normally practice, in order to just fix the immediate problem, the immediate common problem, and doing it, with the idea that when the big problem is sorted out, then fine, then we can go and vote for, sequentially going forward, you can go and then vote for other people to change the way things move, but in small increments, rather than I'm not going to vote for them because of some small difference, or I'm not going to vote at all because I think that somehow is going to make some change. And the point I was making at the meeting the other night was that if you decide to abstain, if you decide to spoil the vote or not vote, that is in effect a direct vote for what you don't want.
But it is a choice to spoil a vote, but the thing is, you've got to realise what the consequences are.
This is a thing.
And, I've always voted. Always voted. Might be wrong, but it's a vote. And then you can't really complain about the result if you don't vote.
Well, that piece of the culture has been fostered as well. It's been encouraged, allowing people to complain when they haven't made a proper choice. And I find that concerning, of course, because, again, all it does is perpetuate the problem. It perpetuates the lie, it perpetuates the control that you don't want, instead of allowing people to learn to make good decisions with or decisions and learn from the consequence. But everything historically, I mean, obviously we're getting a little bit philosophical, or I am, but everything historically seems to be based around not allowing people, or rather diverting their attention away from learning from mistakes. You know, good judgment comes from bad decisions, poor judgment.
I think it's Australia where it's illegal not to vote.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's a...
I think if you don't vote, you have to go into the ring with a kangaroo for 2 rounds.
or a rabbit or 6. And look at the problems that they've got, in fact. Or from our perspective, look at those problems that they seem to have. You know, the very regulated society. And I'm not suggesting that regulation is not a good thing.
It's a nanny state. It's
Very
a
much.
nanny state. Same as the majority of countries nowadays. UK is a nanny state. Europe, well, for those countries there.
I find it quite amusing, actually, the UK, if you look at what all of the colonial control came from, that little island. It's really not much of an island, and if you think about historically how that whole thing has turned and what it's turned into, you've got to see the humour in it. It really is. I find it quite amusing, actually.
Well, you're going to laugh because you'll cry otherwise.
Yeah, the irony will kill you.
And, but it's biting them on the bum now.
No, sure. And I guess that's mainly part of the cycle, isn't
Yes.
it? I would think as well, like any one of these places that's heavily regulated, Australia, for instance, or any one of these places, New Zealand, or where they've got snow or sheep, basically. You know, I think that you'll find that it's a recurrent cycle, and it reaches a point where it all comes tumbling down, and then some logic comes back into the system, and then it goes forward. But I just get sort of disappointed in our local situation, where we could actually make something relatively, on a global scale, relatively good, relatively efficient. But there just seems to be too much. There just seems to be too much. Too much what? Just control and corruption and ego, and everybody wanting to be at the top of the pile, which is, I find ridiculous, of course, but again, it's human nature. I'm going to cut this short because obviously we've got other people around here talking, and I don't know how that's going to sound on this, and if it's going to make nonsense of this, but we'll cut this here and actually carry on with it a little bit later when those people are eating. And they can't talk at the same time. Okay, so back from breakfast, and that was very enjoyable. I thought I'd say a couple more things. Try and not make this too long, but say a couple more things about the situation, and I wanted to continue talking about the mathematical aspect of this whole problem and the numbers game. I spoke about this the other night at the community meeting. That's what I alluded to earlier when I was with Jonty. And I think something people have really got to get into their heads now is that in order to fix the problem that we face, the lack of service delivery, the corruption, all of that stuff that all of those politicians are doing, they're all involved in it in some way. In order to fix that, people need to make a choice that allows the majority opposition to actually have enough power to take control to fix the big problems initially. And if we do that, you have an opportunity to fix the big problem first, or big problems first, and then you have an opportunity to later on fix the smaller problems, or change the ideology, or direction, whatever it is. What concerns me is that people are still thinking, excuse me, they have this mindset, this thing that I was referring to just now as heritage, or the tribal nonsense of we're only going to vote for that minority party because that's what we do, or because we don't like the opposition's approach. Well, if you do that, you don't understand how the system works, and I suggest you go and get a little bit educated about how it works and how I'm talking about specifically now in terms of the council and the municipality, and the number of seats in the council where they make decisions about what's going to happen in the municipality and how money's going to get spent. Now, if the majority of people in there are given to corruption and making bad decisions and self-enrichment and all of that stuff, which is the current case, then by voting, by number one, by not voting, or by voting for one of the small oppositions that has 1 seat in the council, or 2 seats in the council, by doing that, all you are doing is giving that vote to the majority party that is in control. That's a problem. If you don't understand this, then I urge you to go and think carefully about it. Go and look at the number of seats that are given to the ruling party. Go and look at the number of seats that are given to the major opposition parties. And then in comparison to that, look at the number of seats that are taken by the smaller parties. There is a huge discrepancy there. And if you are voting for one of those small parties, you are perpetuating the problem. You really are. We've got more of a chance of putting all of the weight behind the major opposition and rectifying what we can, and we've got more of a chance of holding them accountable if they don't do what they undertake to do, than we have of holding anyone else accountable. And the other thing is that by voting for these little parties, the multitude of them, all that does is it makes people in those 2 majority parties, the majority and the opposition, it makes them look for something to trade for the vote of those individual seats in the council. And when you start compromising your ideology in order to get a vote, then you end up with exactly the situation that we have now, where in order to try and win the political battle, you give something away, you trade something. That's why I made the point earlier about the system being designed to perpetuate the problem, unfortunately. Unfortunately, it is all we have to work with. It's the framework within which we can only work, short of a complete revolution, which is not going to happen. Short of that, this is what we have to work with. So people need to wake up now and actually start contemplating very carefully about what they do and how it is detractive from the long-term goal. And I think that's maybe a thing for people to focus on, is what is it that you are doing, what action, as small as it may seem to you, as ineffective and insignificant as it may seem to you, what are you going to do in terms of voting so that you have a chance at having your opinions, or something that aligns with your opinions, your views, your ideology, something that is aligned with those things? What are you doing to achieve that? I'm feeling a bit like a stuck record. I seem to be repeating this and having these conversations for the last many months. Yeah, a little bit tired of it, but I feel the need to do so because I don't believe people are seeing clearly. If they are, then I'm not seeing a great deal of evidence of it. And if people do understand, that's great. Then you know what? Tell me to shut up. That's cool. Because if I'm missing it somehow, and I can put energy into other things, that's also good. So yeah, let's leave it at this, and I'm going to follow this video up with some of my thoughts about the situation with the new ward councillor, or not new, but the candidate for the by-election in May, and what we ought to do in order to try and retain some direction there. It's not the best situation, far from it, but without being active, without actively making conscious choices about it. And that applies to everybody, making those conscious choices. Without doing that, you might as well switch the lights off completely and close shop, go home, do whatever you have to do, because the wheels are going to fall off a lot faster than you can imagine. So I'll try and put some thoughts down about that, and let's see, maybe it changes some thinking. I hope so. I hope that some of this stuff changes some thinking, because if it's not, then there's no real point in doing it. And I'm certainly not doing these things and saying these things purely for the sake of, having a rant or something. If I want to rant, I'll go and find someone and rant at them. I'll go and find that person and rant at them. But I'm hoping to affect some type of change, or at least some different understanding of the problem that we have. And it is a common problem. Please understand that it's a common enemy, and your future will be affected by it. The future, if you have children, their futures will be affected by it. And I suppose you have two choices. You can just freewheel along and not try and change it, or you can use whatever means is at your disposal to do something about changing it. So that's a choice.